story here this morning. Laborious planning applications for loft extensions and conservatories could be a thing of the past. A report out today is to recommend a relaxation of England's planning laws.
The Barker report will also say the Greenbelt may have to shrink if the economy is to grow, and that too much land is protected and should be handed over to developers. Well, Breakfast's business reporter Richard Westcott is in Birmingham to tell us more. Good morning, Richard.
Welcome to Park Central in Birmingham, a very wet and rainy Park Central in Birmingham. 1,600 new homes, 61 acres, there's parkland, there's going to be shops. Now, one of the biggest criticisms of the planning rules at the moment is that there's too much red tape, that the council officers who spend all their time doing huge projects like this actually spend 80% of their time doing loft conversions and the sort of extensions to people's houses. So this Barker review is about cutting some of that red tape, making it easier to get planning permission. Of course, the campaigners, the environmentalists are worried. They're worried it's going to be a fast-tracking system that'll mean huge building projects that eat up the countryside.
Planning's a balancing act. You've got to build enough homes for people to live in. You've got to let business grow. But there's a downside to all that concrete.
We're losing an area of countryside about the size of Leicester every year. Sure, there is a lot of countryside left, but England is one of the most built-up countries in the European Union. I think only Holland and Belgium are more built up than England's. And we know that people really value the countryside. We want to protect it.
The government ordered this review after criticism that planning red tape was stunting the country's economic growth. Projects like Terminal 5 at Heathrow suffered huge delays before getting the final go-ahead. Shops like IKEA complained they couldn't get permission to build new stores, create more jobs. And a recent report said we need to build an extra 100,000 new houses every year just to cope with demand. Critics blame the system.
We spend too much of planners' time processing loft conversions on a kind of conveyor belt, and the big proactive developments, the town centre regeneration, the sustainable urban extension, the new developments are not getting the time they need.
So, the review could recommend that normal homeowners no longer need to get planning permission to have their extension done. That frees up more time to deal with bigger projects. There's also talk of an independent body to take the big, controversial decisions away from the politicians.
Now, the speculation is that this review is going to come to a very controversial conclusion. It's going to say that land in England is overprotected and it needs to be easier for businesses and for homes to be built. One final thing, if you're one of those lucky people that's ever had to fill out planning forms, I know exactly how you feel, they are apparently going to make those forms a lot easier.
OK, Richard, thank you very much.
Campaigns to save local A&E departments could lead to more than 1,000 unnecessary deaths a year. The Institute for Public Policy Research says patients should be directed to specialist units instead of local hospitals. It's research Tony Blair is expected to mention today when he tries to win popular support for NHS reforms. Critics say many A&E departments are under threat because of financial problems in the health service in England.
What we can do after the treatment now is bust the clot.
Paramedic Neil Spike is trained to give clot-busting drugs to heart attack patients. It's this kind of innovation that's being used to argue for change. That's likely to mean a smaller number of super accident and emergency departments, with others downgraded to deal with less serious cases.
The whole community has to come together if we're going to save...
But protests like these have become common. Communities are campaigning to keep their A&E. Those backing change say travel times have to be balanced against quality of care.
They should think about safety and the quality of the outcomes, as well as things like the convenience of visiting their relatives. At the end of the day, if people want to be able to visit their close-by hospital, that's fine, but they have to weigh up, in some cases, the higher chances of, for example, their relatives surviving a heart attack if they're treated in a specialist centre that's further away.
Richard Taylor...
But this is what can happen, a doctor elected for fighting the loss of A&E, who believes communities must get minimum emergency services.
What they need is a doctor-led service that will provide assessment and care for the bulk of common emergencies.
Changing emergency care is deeply controversial, The government says it's backed by evidence of better care in bigger centres, but the Conservatives say financial pressures are influencing decisions, and many communities are anxious about what reorganisation will mean for them. Bronwyn Jeffries, BBC News.
The Prime Minister of Fiji says he's under house arrest this morning as his army appears to be taking control of the country. Soldiers were deployed at his residence, apparently on the orders of the island's military commander, who's opposed to plans to grant an amnesty to former coup leaders.
Anti-terrorism officers from Scotland Yard have begun their investigations in Russia into the death from radiation poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko. The team flew into Moscow last night and are expected to interview people associated with the former intelligence agent. Russia's foreign minister says the affair is harming relations between the two countries.
A police community support officer remains critically ill in hospital after being stabbed in the neck while on duty in Greater Manchester. He was injured while assisting an eviction at a house in Staley Bridge. A 63-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of wounding.
The increase in obesity could lead to as many as 1,500 more cancers a year in Britain by the year 2010. Cancer Research UK, which carried out the survey, claims that too few people are aware of the link between excess weight and the risk of developing tumours.
I look so well there as I do now.
Louise Diss is determined she'll never go back to the days when she weighed over 20 stone. She knew it wasn't good for her, but she had no idea her weight was putting her at greater risk of developing cancer. Then doctors found an abnormal growth in her womb. In the end, it wasn't cancer, but the scare was her spur to lose weight.
I was absolutely determined to do something about it. I've got children. I want to live to be old and healthy. And I realised that I was worth more than getting ill and getting old, or getting ill before I got old.
She's not alone. There's widespread ignorance of the cancer risks of being overweight. After smoking, obesity is one of the biggest preventable causes of the disease. But according to Cancer Research UK, only 29% of overweight or obese people know that. They say excess weight causes 3.8% of all cancers, and if obesity rates keep rising, there'll be 1,500 extra cases a year by the end of the decade.
It's very worrying because obviously these are cancers that are largely preventable by changes to lifestyle. So it's important that we get the message out there and encourage people to find ways to reduce their risk of cancer where they can.
But with 1 in 4 Britons now clinically obese, we're used to hearing warnings about the risks. The question is whether this one will be able to make a difference. Jane Hughes, BBC News.
NASA has said it plans to start work on a permanently occupied base on the Moon. It's thought the centre could be used as a staging post for any manned mission to Mars. James Westhead reports.
No, I'll get it. I knew there was something I needed to do.
The last time man walked on the Moon was 34 years ago, during the Apollo missions. This time, the mission for NASA is not just to get to the Moon, but stay there and build a permanent base. The space agency has already announced a new manned spacecraft called Orion. Unlike the aging space shuttle it replaces, Orion's reusable pod will be able to reach the Moon and return, carrying astronauts back and forth by the year 2020. Now NASA says they'll build a permanent lunar outpost, probably near one of the Moon's poles, to maximize sunlight for solar energy. Nuclear power may be used too. The base will become home to a number of scientists testing new technologies and carrying out research impossible back on Earth.
There's the exciting opportunities of having a quiet zone on the backside of the Moon for the folks that are looking in the radio frequencies to look out into the universe, to be able to look back at our own planet, to be able to look at history of the formation of our solar system that has probably been preserved on the Moon.
NASA believes the Moon base could also be a commercial opportunity and is looking for businesses or other countries to share the cost, even providing facilities from oxygen supplies to lunar transport.
They've got the flag up now.
Unlike the Apollo missions, astronauts will eventually live for up to 6 months at a time on the Moon and explore its dark side. The ultimate aim, to prepare for future travel to Mars, the next frontier in space exploration. James Westhead, BBC News in Washington.
Now, royalty met celebrity last night as the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall met glamour model Jordan and her husband Peter Andre at the Royal Variety performance. They were introduced to the couple alongside the reformed boy band Take That. The show was hosted by Jonathan Ross, and it also featured a performance from the Sugar Babes and an appearance by David Guest, of whom I'm sure the Prince was a huge fan. I bet he voted for him many times.
Those are this morning's top stories.